Greetings! My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And today we've got a special sneak preview from one of the new monster stat blocks in the 2025 Monster Manual.
We have gotten an early copy of the Monster Manual and have gotten a chance to look at some of the brand new monsters in it. And today we get to do a highlight on one of those monsters. And so we're going to be talking about the Animal Lord. This CR20 creature can be a big threat for your party and comes in many different variations. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
In full disclosure, Wizards of the Coast did give us early access to the stat block and excerpt of the Animal Lord for the purposes of making this video, but we were not otherwise compensated by Wizards for creating this content. Animal Lords are brand new monsters in the 2025 Monster Manual. They are immortal, legendary celestials who act as divine guardians of animal kind. They can appear as giant versions of the animals they protect, or as a human-animal hybrid. They travel to the material plane in times of environmental crisis or when nature is threatened. And I could see using this stat block to represent a divine incarnation of nature's wrath, a powerful guiding spirit that acts as a patron to the player characters, such as Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia.
I am already imagining the forest spirit from Princess Mononoke. If you don't know, Princess Mononoke is one of my favorite films. I mention it a lot as inspiration, but immediately I think of all of the animals and the spirits of that movie and what they represent. There's so many great spiritual animal protectors that exist in media that you can draw inspiration for what these creatures represent from so many different places. And the Animal Lords, with all of their varieties that we've seen, have 3 variants available in this book. They can be foragers, which represents creatures like rabbits, stags, and bears. They can be hunters, which can be represented by hawks, snakes, wolves, or even cats. Or they could be sages, which can be represented by coyotes, crows, owls, and turtles. Each has a different aura and special ability, but their game statistics are otherwise mostly identical.
You know, you could also use these to represent Twilight Princess Link.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool. So let's dive into their game statistics. Animal Lords are medium-sized, challenge rating 20 Celestials. They have AC 19 and 323 hit points. They're really fast with a 60-foot base speed, including a fly speed and swim speed, regardless of their form. So already we're seeing challenge rating 20 monsters being pretty tanky. 300 plus hit points used to be the domain of like something like a Baylor in the 2014 rules. So this is a lot more hit points for a challenge rating 20 monster.
Not only that, but they have expertise in initiative, which means that they have a plus 19. So good luck trying to go before them in combat. And if your plan is to sneak up on the Animal Lords, sorry rogues, but that's going to be a really tough call, seeing as the Animal Lords have true sight. And they also have a passive perception of 28.
They're also resistant to a ton of damage types. Cold, fire, necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage. They're immune to being charmed, frightened, and stunned. And their lowest ability score is a 19 intelligence, which, with the rest of their stats being in the low to mid 20s. They're proficient in con and wisdom saving throws, plus they have magic resistance and 4 uses of legendary resistance. These are really impressive passive defenses. I feel like spellcasters, some of our top tier spellcasters, like Aberrant Mind Sorcerers and Great Old One Warlocks, are not going to have a good time with Animal Lords, because their magical defenses and immunities kind of shut down psychic and charm and all those effects completely. Yeah.
Now, you also want to keep in mind that although the creature is CR20, encounter building and balance has shifted a bit in 2024. Just because it's CR20 doesn't mean it's supposed to go toe-to-toe with a 20th level character group solo. A single Animal Lord is more appropriate as a high difficulty encounter for 4 level 14 characters. And the encounter budget appropriately allows a 20th level party to face off against 3 animal lords, which I love because this means that you could have an epic final showdown against the forager, the hunter, and the sage all at once.
Now, let's dive into their abilities and traits. Every animal lord has the Lordly Presence ability, which grants them a permanent 30-foot emanation aura. And any creature that starts their turn within the aura has to make a DC 20 wisdom save or suffer an effect determined by the type of animal lord.
There are, again, the 3 different types of animal lords. So if you are running the forager, the target is charmed, and while charmed is incapacitated.
So hypnotic pattern
Yeah.
aura.
You lose the saving throw, you don't get a turn. If you are facing off against the hunter, then the target is frightened. If you are a melee combatant and you fail that saving throw and aren't right up to the animal lord, then you lose your turn.
Because you can't move up to a frightened target, and you have disadvantage on attack rolls again when you can see your frightened target.
Yeah. And for the sage, the creature is going to take 3d6 psychic damage and subtract 1d4 from their saving throws until the end of their next turn. So all 3 of these are pretty intense debuffs.
All of those effects are just the passive aura. As we actually get into the actions of the animal lord, they're pretty straightforward. They have a multi-attack, which lets them use their rend melee attack or radiant ray ranged attack twice in any combination. And then they get to use, as part of their multi-attack, their animal spirit ability, which we're going to detail in just a moment. But it's enough to say that their basic attacks are pretty accurate and do about 20 damage on average. And again, they can switch hit between melee and range pretty flexibly. Animal Spirit is not an attack, it's a saving throw, DC 20 Dex, with a range of 120 feet. And it does about 30 damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. And then either way, the animal lord causes an extra effect, once again, based on its type.
So again, if you are running the forager, then the extra effect is that it just gains 20 temporary hit points. Remember that this happens whether the creature succeeds or fails. So every turn, they're just going to gain 20 temporary hit points. If you're running the hunter, this animal lord gains advantage on attack rolls against the target until the start of its next turn. So they can just come in swinging.
Basically, they can just give themselves advantage on attacks against a single player character and just start hammering that character with attacks.
And if you're the sage, the creature has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the start of its next turn.
Worth noting, all these effects happen success or failure.
Success or failure, yeah.
They can just give a player character a disadvantage or gain advantage. There's no way for the players to stop that.
The Animal Lord also has spell casting, which is mostly flavorful. They have spells like Speak with Animals that they can use and a lot of other animal-based spells. But the Sage does gain access to animal shapes and sunburst, giving them a little bit more oomph with their spell casting.
All the Animal Lords also have a bonus action ability to shapeshift, which allows them to transform into huge or small versions of the animals they represent or into a humanoid hybrid form. Their game statistics, other than their size, don't change, so this is mostly a ribbon feature. Animal Lords also have legendary actions, which are pretty basic. One of their legendary actions is just to fire their Radiant Ray once, and their other legendary action allows them to move their speed without provoking opportunity attacks, which, remember, is a 60-foot fly speed, and then they also get to make a rend attack. So, if we consider all this together and start looking at their combat tactics, the legendary actions really turn the Animal Lord, I think, into a powerful switch hitter. And I think that if we're thinking about this as a solo encounter, I would probably build around the Hunter. I think it's the most interesting solo monster challenge. So this would be something that I would put up against level 14 characters. It's going to be extremely mobile, avoiding opportunity attacks using its legendary action, and it's going to keep the party at bay with its frightening aura. Well, it's going to use Marked for Prey to gain advantage on melee and ranged attacks against one of its chosen prey, and so it's basically going to be frightening and terrifying the party while flying in and out of range and picking them off one by one by making all of their attacks against its chosen prey with advantage. And so its damage output, like, these things have a plus 13 to hit.
It's pretty accurate.
They're very accurate and they're giving themselves advantage.
Yeah.
So if all their attacks are hitting and they're also landing their animal spirit ability, you're looking at about 100-ish to 130 damage per round, which A maxed out level 14 fighter that like went all in on maxing out their hit points can have upwards of 200 hit points. So this guy downs the fighter in 2 rounds.
That's impressive. That's not looking too good for the fighter, and it's not much better for the barbarian because all of the Animal Lord's attacks are radiant or force damage, which the barbarian cannot easily resist. Yeah. So the melee fighters, I mean, combined with the fact that these things can stay at range, it's going to be a tough battle.
Yeah.
And this actually gets a lot worse when we look at what happens at 20th level when we are fighting 3 of them. So if you put all 3 Animal Lords on the table against a 20th level party, it's going to be pretty nasty because all of them can now layer their auras, which means that they are incapacitating, frightening, and debuffing the saves of the entire party as long as they're within 30 feet. Whether or not you're getting 1, 2, or 3 of these auras triggered on you, it's not a good time. And not to mention the sheer amount of legendary actions that you would get with 3 legendary creatures. And the damage output they will have as well from those legendary actions is going to be pretty intense. And on top of all of that, they're forcing the party to make a ton of saving throws. Because they have a 60-foot fly speed and a ranged attack that hits just as hard as their melee attacks, the Animal Lords can just fly around shooting their enemies, and a party that isn't well equipped to deal with ranged combat is really going to suffer here. And even though they're good at range, I would say optimally the Animal Lords are going to want to stay within 30 feet to force creatures into their auras while using their mobility and their legendary action that allows them to use their fly speed to move without provoking opportunity attacks to sort of keep them out of dangerous situations.
Now, another variation would be to pair the Animal Lord with several other creatures, such as beasts of its kind, elementals, or a group of druids and barbarians. I think that the giant ape, the mammoth, and the Tyrannosaurus Rex can be pretty easily reflavored to feel like dire versions of whatever beast the Animal Lord represents. So those are 3 stat blocks that are going to pose a threat to 14th to 20th level characters, because a lot of beasts are like challenge rating 1 and 2. And I don't think that you want to grab a bunch of like dire wolf stat blocks to pair with your Animal Lord, because they're just going to get blown up by fireball. I mean, you could, but I think you want something more robust. So I would reflavor the T-Rex to be a wolf, or the mammoth to be like a giant boar or a bear, whatever you need that high level CR monster.
Reflavoring can go a long way there. And as we move into role playing and campaign ideas, I do think that you could start the campaign fighting against dire wolves, building up to that. And I think the Animal Lord is a great antagonist for a setting that has angered the wilds. And the campaign may not be about killing the Animal Lords. That's something I don't think the Animal Lords come off as inherently evil. But I think I could see a campaign where you're trying to undo the wrong done by society and industry. It could very well be that you are a group of heroes who have seen the anger of the wilds rising up against the city, and you sort of play the middle ground, trying to stop the deforestation or the hunting in the sacred woods, while also appeasing these Animal Lords before their wrath destroys all of humanity. It can kind of play into that classic trope of human industry versus nature, and one that I think is brought to life really well with the Animal Lord.
Now, I think that the idea that there's many different Animal Lords to choose from allows you to have a kind of a group of them in your campaign, and perhaps the players have to negotiate with different Animal Lords to solve the problem and work with them. And maybe the sages are more reasonable, the foragers are more neutral, but the hunters are vengeful and won't listen to reason and simply want to retaliate. I also really like the idea of maybe the Animal Lords have been corrupted by the human influence. And so it might be that you have a corrupt Animal Lord, you change all the radiant damage to necrotic or poison damage, and the player characters have to purify and heal the Animal Lords and return them back to their natural state, like something has been thrown out of balance by that ideal. Or, there's just the idea that like nature at a certain point is always just going to be so vengeful that like you do have to defeat the wrathful elements of nature in order to appease it overall.
I once again implore everybody who's vibing with this idea to watch Princess Mononoke, because I
Yeah.
think that's the idea is at the very beginning they fight against the boar that is like contaminated.
Yeah.
And then as they seek out what's going on with this demon beast that they had to fight, they find out that it was a spirit that was then changed by the industry nearby.
This has a lot of like classic 80s fantasy children's stories to it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you are channeling like the Princess Mononoke never ending story, maybe like a little bit of a Disney movie vibe, your Aslan type characters again, which I think is really, really cool for that type of campaign that wants to explore a more nuanced topic where nobody's really a villain, nobody's really evil, but it is about bringing the world back in, like the balance of the world has been thrown off.
Yeah.
And it needs to be brought back into balance. Things need to be brought into harmony. And the people who are acting vengefully or violently are doing so because because that's their response to the crisis.
I do think that one of the clever ways to do this is we looked at the CR versus the players. And so in and around level 10 to 12, 12 to 14, the party could end up facing off against one of the animal lords that they've made a villain of within the campaign. And if they don't defeat that animal lord, maybe by this point it's become clear that there are 3 who will not budge. But if they don't take out one, by the time they reach 20th level, even a 20th level party against all 3 is going to be a tough battle.
Yeah.
So it is about trying to like separate at least one from them and defeat that animal lord so that the final battle's a bit easier. And you actually get to play with those stakes of if we can't take out one of these animal lords before they group together against us, it's going to be a really tough battle in the end.
I think you could even introduce the animal lords to a much lower level party because their shape-shifting ability means that the animal lord can appear like the lore of them says that they always have these glowing eyes. So the animal lord can appear to the party as like a weird talking fox or like just a strange talking animal, and maybe the animal lord is even a patron of the party, works with them from very low levels, and the party gradually becomes aware that there's more of these animal spirits and that there's disagreement between these animal spirits over how to interact with humanity. And so the animal lord that they interacted with early at like first level that sent them on like that innocent mission to like save the deer that's been wounded in the hunter's trap in the woods, right?
Yeah.
And then that now evolves into, well, actually the other animal lords disagree. You know, maybe the one animal lord that came to the player characters broke a rule of the other animal lords not to get the humans involved.
And now
and
they
then
are.
so there's actually like that rivalry amongst the animal lords and disagreement over do we work with the humans or do we just regard them as a threat?
You could also do this idea where the animal lords aren't inherently antagonistic. It's as humanity pushes further into the wilds, they become more and more vengeful or resistant to that. So even an animal lord that starts off maybe not antagonistic, but with that sort of attitude of like, why have you come to my woods? You don't belong here. But then over time, that same animal lord can become one of the villains of the campaign when it's like, you've overstayed your welcome. Now there's more of you. And even if the party's like, we didn't bring them here, they're just chopping down trees. So I do like the idea of the animal lords. In a lot of media, it's these animal spirits are often blind to differentiate humanity. So they just see humanity as a problem overall. And the party's goal is to convince the animal lords that not all humans are the problem, just most of them.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lot of nuance that you can get in there because I think a lot of fantasy storytelling falls into this trap of the default assumption that nature is all about balance and that anything that is natural is inherently good. And the thing is that in the real world, those aren't true. Nature also embodies brutality, savagery, uncaringness, right? The cycle of evolution is about, you know, there's the idea of survival of the fittest, right? The law of the jungle. These are pretty brutal and uncaring ideas. And some of the animal lords might embody those things. And there's even examples throughout natural history of nature actually going out of control and causing its own environmental collapse, even without humans. Like that has happened. So the idea of balance in nature is a bit of a valorization and a human moralization of forces of nature that is popular in fantasy, but not necessarily true in reality. And so if you want to kind of play with that trope, you might want to explore maybe the ideas, the ways in which nature is not necessarily about balance, and the ways in which nature is not necessarily about growth and harmony, but about brutality and savagery. And the Animal Lords you could flip it on its head, and it could be a more brutal survival sort of situation with the Animal Lords. We don't necessarily need to fall into that. I'm not going to say it's a trap, because it's a classic fantasy trope of like the balance of nature. But I just want to bring up that point that like the balance of nature is a human moralization of nature that has a very specific perspective that isn't one that is necessarily like a fundamental truth of reality.
Well, one thing I love seeing in a new monster is the ideas that get us talking about campaigns, adventures, and all of that. So this is our look at the Animal Lord in the new monster manual. And there's actually a ton of monsters that we're pretty excited about. So we're going to be doing a few more videos coming up that look at some of the awesome monsters available in this book. If the Animal Lord has inspired you, tell us about your favorite tropes that you think you could use the Animal Lord to bring to life in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider becoming a patron. The links are right down below.
And if you want to see us messing up nature, you can check out our actual play in the Worlds of Drakenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
We got a lot more videos talking about the monsters of D&D right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time
in the dungeon.